Hey guys, thank you for joining us on another episode of Emergent Leadership. Today, I am fortunate enough to be with Julianne Stevenson. Thank you for being with me tonight, Julianne. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much. And thank you for having me.
Of course. So, we obviously like to start with kind of the path to leadership. Why we're having this discussion today. Julianne, you have a path in education. So, want to talk to you a little bit about how did you get started and how did you end up where you are today? Today, you are the founder and chief facilitator for Sterling Credentials. So, I want to dive into that a little bit as we go, but really want to focus on your path to leadership and how you're using your organization to lead in the industry and what that looks like and what you're leading on and all the things that you're passionate about. So if you don't mind, Julianne, just sharing with our audience a little bit who you are and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Well, I was using my master's degree in molecular physiology and biophysics while I was working at NASA, and I started volunteering at my local service, and I fell in love. I mean, I started actually as a nurse aide when I was 16 years old, which is, like not that glamorous. And so when I started running duty as a paramedic, I remember I called my mom and dad and I was like, I know I still have a bunch of student loan debt from the master's degree and everything, but I'm going to go be a paramedic. And
Man, I have to pause you already because you literally just said like it was no big deal. They were like biomolecular, crazy, whatever, working for NASA. And you dropped it in the conversation like NBD. And that's a big deal.
Well, you want to
I already have to pause you.
Right?
Oh, to what?
I said you got to grab your audience, right?
Yeah, well, I'm grabbed. So you're working for NASA, and you've kind of found out about EMS. How did you even? Where does that come from? I want to stop you like this early in the story to ask that question. Where in the world?
Well,
did you look into EMS?
Here's the answer. I thought I was going to be a physician. And no other time in my life have I failed to reach a goal that I set for myself, except this time. I interviewed 3 years in a row. I waitlisted 2 years and finally decided that's apparently not where I'm supposed to be. I had taken the EMS classes to improve my application to medical school because they always ask you, what have you done since the last time to make your application better? Silly me, little did I know that actually turned them off for me rather than bringing them in. So yeah, that's where it came from. So I actually put it on inactive while I was getting my master's degree, which actually I ditched out of a PhD program because I just realized that lifestyle wasn't for me. And so got my job at NASA, and I was there a little over a year, and then I went paramedic full time.
Wow. So what a crazy path. I mean, I've talked to so many people, and I would say there's always similarities in the stories, but everybody's path is so unique. And what a cool way to feel and hear and kind of take on the energy of what's going on around you to go, this isn't for me, right? Like just because you're trying really hard at something doesn't always mean that's the right path for you. In fact, you heard, I'm trying really hard and it's not working. There must be something else that's at play here that I don't have control over. And so what do I have control over? And so you kind of landed in EMS because you took a class that you thought was going to end you in a different path, and it didn't. So now you're on a truck. I presume you're working on a truck. You're in a volunteer service. Which service were you in, if you don't mind sharing?
Friendswood Volunteer EMS. It's actually the Friendswood Volunteer Fire Department, and then the EMS section of it. Yeah.
Okay, so you're volunteering on a truck. At this point, you had decided that med school was out.
Yes.
Okay, med school's out.
And
EMS is in.
I had a big chip on my shoulder about it for a while, but now as I review my life, my master's degree made me a fairly large fish in a relatively small pond, to where I could do things beyond, make an impact outside the box, right? That's what I always talk about. When you're a paramedic, you impact every patient you touch and their families, and that's where it stops. But when you move into the next step, whatever that is for you, then you've expanded your span of influence.
Right.
And so as an educator, I touch all the patients that my graduates touch. And as a program director, I influence not only my students, but also then my faculty. In fact, I was a supervisor for 2 years. And I left that because I got so frustrated with the 80% of people who just wanted to sort of come to work and be left alone. I'm a learn something new every day kind of person.
Right.
Well, people who come to school, they come because they want to learn something new. And so the more I can engage with that and the more I can elevate that, the happier I am.
Sure. No, you did so great. So you stepped from being on a truck and a volunteer to you managed, you were a director of, and now education. I want to take a little bit of a step back. So you jumped into, so you're on a truck, you're few months before thinking you're going to med school. Now you're on a truck, you're in EMS, you're volunteering. What a culture shock. I want to talk about that, Julianne. What was the biggest kind of thing that impacted you? Because obviously something caught you, something grabbed you, sucked you in, girl. So what was it?
I mean, all right. So there's two sides of that. The positive side is I have always adored connecting with individuals in precious moments. And that precious moment, it can be standing in line with somebody at the grocery store. But as a paramedic, those moments were so much more extreme. And, you know, the one that immediately comes to mind is the patient that was awake in a GCS of 15 when I met her. And then as soon as we made contact, it was like she had that relaxing decompensation, and she was dead before you got to the hospital, and she had a DNR. You know, so talk about a moment of honor that, you know, I really shouldn't be there. The flip side of that, though, the negative side, was 2 parts. Number one, I came from research, and the whole point of research is we have a question. We don't know the answer. Let's find it. But when I started seeking input from my colleagues about this question or that question or the other question, I was stunned at the number of times that I was given some, pardon the term, BS answer.
Right.
Instead of just saying, I don't know. These are like 3 of the most powerful words in the world. I don't know, but let's find out together. The other thing was the reception that I got at the emergency room. It was stunning to me because I thought, aren't we all on the same team? Don't we all want the same thing? And fortunately for me, I mean, I worked on the island in Galveston, and so I went to the same hospital all the time, which happened to be a teaching hospital. And I had several physicians tell me, look, don't call for orders, just do what you need to do, because I know whatever you do will be right, and I'll sign whatever you want me to sign.
Wow.
So, you know, that why can't we in our industry just say, I don't know? Well, we have this culture of you've got to know everything. You know, just like ACLS has moved to the team, you know, the team model, rather than when I took it, they had to have 2 malfunctions and you worked 4 or 5 rhythms, and, you know, instructors would do things like disconnect the BVM or take the battery out of the monitor or whatever, and you had to troubleshoot that while working the code. And so, you know, AHA has transitioned. I don't know that our industry has caught up.
Yeah, gosh.
Did I answer the question, or did I just go off and left field?
Go if you need to go. That's what this is about. We're going places, and we're talking about things that matter. So you're talking about your experience was how you were received, and what kind of sucked you in was the researcher in you saying, I have questions and y'all haven't yet answered them, right? So whether that's in Galveston, Texas, or the south of the US, or the US versus other countries, Julianne saying, I have questions. Who's going to answer them, or who's going to admit that they don't know? And who can I work with to find solutions? If not an answer, a solution. So that's always clearly been ingrained in you in your EMS career. Fast forward, you said you were a manager of a program, and then you got into education, which is kind of where I feel like your passion and your interest started, was in education, understanding And then you circle back through in your EMS career and said, all right, truck's not for me. Or whatever that looks like to you, but you got to where you are now. So where are you now, Julianne? And are you still in EMS?
So yes, I'm still in EMS. I haven't actively practiced in a couple of years. I've had some health things going on, but in the instructional aspect, you know, you have to maintain a level of awareness that's even higher, I believe, than a practicing clinician, because in order to teach effectively, you can't teach at the level of your knowledge, right? You've got to have some kind of foundation supporting you, so that when that student asks the question, hopefully most of the time, you've got some kind of answer, hypothesis, or source to definitively answer their question.
Okay.
Also, to be able to push the critical thinking aspect of how do we need to, I mean, what is the process by which we should be approaching a patient? You know, it's not just about assessment, it's about what you do with the assessment findings. So I do a lot of coaching on differential diagnosis, and you got to have 5. I require 5. Best case, worst case, and some in the middle. And then your assessment you use to narrow that list down. And then as I prepared for my first accreditation site visit, which for those of you who are unfamiliar, it's every 5 years. And if you don't get reaccredited, you don't have a program and likely don't have a job.
And so
my father had a
accredited.
Do what?
So who is that through that you're getting accredited, for those who don't know?
So KHIP is the parent organization. And then for each allied health specialty, there's what's called a COA. So it's the COA EMSP subgroup, I guess, that interprets the rules for EMS and tells us what we need to do. And so you submit a big giant report that's all kinds of information, and then you host a site visit with at least 2 inspectors, and it's a 2-day deal with all kinds of stuff, meetings with your clinical affiliates, and it's a big production.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd never been through it before.
Okay.
And my dad has 12 months to live. And the loneliness of those moments, because there is no support crew, there is no assistance, there is no delegation. It was all on me. So do I go visit my dad, who lives 4 hours away, or do I buckle down and work on trying to organize? I mean, we'd done everything we were supposed to do, but it was just a matter of getting it into the format that was requested. I mean, in the site visit, they required you to schedule a 2 to 3 hour time block for inspection of documents.
Right.
We were done in 17 minutes because I had everything where the inspectors expected it to be and where they could find it. And then we just sat around shooting the breeze, which was cool. But anyway, my point is, the dream of one-click accreditation was born. That's my big bodacious dream for Sterling, is when it's time to submit your report, there is one button that you click, and that's because you will have collected everything that you need right within the Sterling platform. But the priority is that it has to be easy. It has to be a good experience. We don't have to take a training class on how to run social media. And you don't have to take a training class to run Sterling either. That's been my demand all along. So we're building the foundational minimum requirements, and then, yeah, hope to build a mansion on top of that.
That's awesome. You said something though, and I have to ask. So you had a decision point where your father was sick. You were in a highly stressful situation where you had to choose how you spend your time and your energy and what you devote to. I'm sure you'd already devoted everything you needed to your father, who was going through what he was going through. But what was that decision point? Did you decide to stick in that and build it and do that EMS thing and support your family, of course, as you could? Or did you go, there's no way I can do this, throw your hands up and go jump into your family? Where were you in that space with the tools that you have?
Well, there is no question there. My father taught me, you either have integrity or you don't. There is no middle ground on that. And when you make a commitment to somebody, you follow through. my father would never had me abandon something that I was responsible for. So I did both the best I could at the moment, which is all anybody I think can ever do.
I love that. And you took the wisdom of your family and your upbringing and your values. And at that moment, that emotion, I always say people don't make, I've been in true sales since I was 15. So that's, I'm not 16. So a handful of years. People don't make decisions because it makes sense. They make decisions because they make emotion decisions. People, that's the why. Yes. I talk about this a lot. You'll hear people say, why not? But nobody makes a decision based on why not. The why not never is the trigger. It's the why yes that triggers. And so what I just heard you say, Julianne, which is absolutely beautiful, is your why yes was you have a devotion and a commitment to be exactly where you are in that moment, but do the best that you can. And then know that you can make it better and that it's okay to be where you are. But that realization that it can go to that next level is what founded your company, that your Sterling Credentials was founded off of the principles that your father had taught you, that you see a problem. It's your job as an intelligent human being to find a solution, not just to be okay. Like the story you gave earlier to say, some BS answer, but to say, I don't know. And like you said a bit ago, but let's work together to find out. And so that's the founding of your company and what you're doing today, which I think is a beautiful story. So thank you for sharing.
I never want someone else to have to be in that decision space. I want them to be able to go, okay, I can go take care of this other thing because I know accreditation is not a problem.
Right. So tell me about the product. So Sterling Credentials, and thank you for diving in and being vulnerable. I think emotions are very real and very powerful. And I just feel honored that you shared them with me. So thank you for that. But you founded a company. You're like, this is big enough and serious enough. And I think most importantly, a need enough in this industry that you've been in at that point for how many years?
20 something.
Right. 20 something years later, like this is a problem. And now I've found the solution. And it may have taken an aha moment or a powerful emotional moment to go, I'm not doing this again. Right. And I don't want other people to have to do this, to dive in and say, I'm going to find the solution. I'm going to offer that solution to people. And, you haven't stopped. I know that you started this company. So when did you start the company, Julianne, the Sterling Credentials? When did you found it?
Well, technically the documents say 2015.
Okay.
We didn't have anything ready to start testing probably for a year because it was very part-time.
Sure.
And then for the last several years, mostly my own personal students were the guinea pigs to help me make sure things were working and get things tweaked and changed. I mean, I really didn't want to go to market until I had something that I could be proud of.
Of course. No, and that's great. I love that. And how cool that you can use your students and they get a sneak peek into that. I think probably a piece of that, maybe you plant the seed of other people in the industry today who now know the value of that tool. So tell me a little bit about your tool, if you don't mind. What does it do? I'm hearing, and I think I understand, it kind of helps organize documents. It's a credentialing support program. So for which credentials does it support? Who is your target audience? Who does this help and how?
So that's been a real challenge for me with marketing. You have to have your message right, because we serve everyone from EMR students through program directors and everybody in between. It starts with the collection of all the preclinical documents, pre-admission requirements, very simple process, no instructions required, through lab skills and simulations, and then to clinical field internship. And one of the big things that I insisted on in the reporting system, the patient care reporting system, is that it works like the real thing. So that students they're not having a cognitive distraction of trying to figure out how to work the software. They're just working the software, and it's particularly beneficial to our advanced students, right? Because they know what an EPCR system looks like.
Right.
So, and then we've built in this little assisting things for program directors. For example, once you create your affiliates that your students go do rotations at, you put in the date that your affiliate agreement expires, and then start getting reminders 100 days out, so that you can get those renewed. Because if you don't renew those agreements, then you're in violation probably of your state regulations even, and students can't go to. So the things that slip through the cracks, we're building those in, because again, program director, that they need a safety net. I mean, that first year it's terrible, because you're trying to master all the administrative things from the college and record keeping and everything else side, that I don't know, maybe that accounts for some of the turnover that we see.
Well, and if you're so worried, and this is something that, I see and feel very passionately about personally, is when you're so worried about the tasks as a leader, it's hard to be a leader, right? So
yes,
and you look at personality profiles, and you look at how people allocate their energy and what comes naturally and not so naturally. And so there's a lot of things that play into this that can tell you, I'm putting air quotes around, how someone's going to behave. A lot of times pretty reliably, that you can understand how someone operates. And people that are in a paramedic role or an EMT role, or even a first responder credentialing, or an ambulance driver, you've got a piece of the pie. And so when you have that piece of the pie at those frontline levels, they're typically task oriented. So your piece is, do this patient care, push this button, if then you do this thing. And not to demean the role, it's the role in our industry, but it's a task role. It's not a vision role, right? Do this thing well. And so as you move up the ranks, some of the big challenges people face is, you're a great paramedic, we're going to promote you into a supervisor role, and you don't know how to be a supervisor. And so giving people the tools to be successful in each of those roles are not only integral to their success, but imperative to even the maintenance of that title and that person, that role. So you take a paramedic who's great at being a paramedic and put them in a supervisor role, and they can probably figure it out, because there's support in a lot of systems. And I would say in every system I've been in, even up to mid-level manager and occasionally a senior level manager, you still on the baseline are jumping in, running calls, reviewing charts, making sure that EPCRs are appropriate or accurate, or billing stuff. And so you're doing task things as your default, because that's where you were born and bred. But when you put people, so I myself am not clinical. I've never been on a truck other than as a shadow, to learn our customers or to learn the processes and the field employees and how they operate. My mind thinks differently, Julianne, than a lot of people's. And I'm not protocol driven and yes and no. I'm very gray area. Very gray area. That's actually my comfort zone, is gray area, where other people are very uncomfortable with that. They're like, no, it's yes or no, right or wrong, Brett. And I'm like, yeah, right. Like, you and I are different. And I love that. That's why I love about this industry, is I am different. And I appreciate the differences. But what I'm hearing you say is, you're saying even at that level of a director of a program, if your task is getting in the way of your vision and your leadership and your ability to drive a mission,
yes,
you have a tool for that. Like, hate to say you're doing it wrong, but you might be doing it wrong. Right? And maybe it's a resource thing. Maybe it's a function thing. Maybe it's a not understanding, but it's, how do you get yourself to a position where you can truly lead and, give the tasks where the task should be given. And sometimes that is technology. Sometimes that's a database, Or to your
Well,
point,
and that's what I say. I want to take the dumb jobs off their plate. The
right?
dumb jobs, the stuff that's kind of high acuity but low skill. I'm going to take all that away so that, yeah, you're right. Exactly. They can think about what's the big picture and where do I want this program to be in 3, 5, 10 years, or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why we started the mastermind group. I've got Chris Petrello and David Blevins on board to be my two sort of more experienced mentors. I'm primarily going to organize, facilitate, and I don't know, referee when needed, because I'm sure with a bunch of EMS people, it's going to be needed. And then we're starting with 5 program directors who've been program directors for less than 12 months. And, one of our first meetings, we're going to talk about budgeting, because we know they're coming up on their budget process at the beginning of the year. And nobody ever taught me about budgeting. They just threw last year's budget at me and said, well, what do you want to do next year? And I had to figure it out. So yeah, if we can, you're right. If we can at least have an awareness of higher level needs. I mean, when I first started as a supervisor, if my chief hadn't sent me off to the Teaks Leadership Academy, I would have never realized that there was a whole foreign skill set that I needed to pay attention to, and particularly me, because I'm kind of a bulldozer when it comes to getting things done. I want to get things done. And so that makes me not as sensitive as I should be to people's feelings on the way. So,
Sure.
I'm still working on it. So if you ever speak to me and you feel like I'm not getting it, you just got to kind of smack me in the head and tell me to listen.
I will not smack
I
you in the head.
realize that,
I will not.
well,
But I hear you.
I'm a very logic driven person. I want the data and I want to understand, and I don't see any reason to have any kind of feelings about that one way or the other.
Right.
But I know now that there are people who have they're a lot more in touch maybe with their own feelings than I am. Maybe I've partitioned, I don't know. But it's a higher skill set. And if you're distracted with a bunch of dumb jobs, a bunch of BS, I know that your administration asks you for a report and they want it at 5 o'clock today, and you're in the classroom until 5 o'clock. And so I'm building in things that are going to help facilitate those kind of demands.
Right. Who does your product best support by job title? Who do you think that person is?
Brett, you're asking me a hard question because I've been there. And so I know the pain points of the students, and I know the pain points of the educators, and I know the pain points of the program directors. And I have at least begun to whip them all. So I don't know the answer to that. I think, of course, I have a special interest in the program directors because that's where so much of my personal emotional upheaval did happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I've spent so much time with students and how they struggle with what's going on in their lives, or maybe they're not so book smart, or maybe they've never had somebody tell them, look, you can do this. I believe in you. And so there's a special place in my heart for those people who are putting their all. I mean, they come to community college while they've got a full-time 40-plus hour job, a 40-plus hour a week job, plus kids, plus financial difficulties. And then I'm pushing them with my level of rigor, which was pretty uncompromising. But they come out on the other side all the better for it, just like all of us when we go through challenges, right? So yeah. I'm as much in service to them as I am to the educators.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I have to say a few things. You said you think maybe you've kind of compartmentalized emotion because you're a to-do lister and you're like, I got to get this done. One, I think there's a lot of people listening to this podcast right now that can relate to that. Two, I am very emotional, but it doesn't mean I'm not also a to-do lister. I've got my pen in my hand and my notepad, right? Like I am a get shit done too. And so I think the cool thing and why you and I connected, Julianne, and for those listening, we've never met. This is the first time we've spoken, on a video, as a lot of my podcast guests have been. We've built a relationship, and I feel connected to you because your passion and your emotion is why you're doing what you're doing. We tapped into that already today. So you can tell me all day long.
You are correct.
Yeah, you can tell me all day long that this isn't an emotional thing for you, but girl, I hear it and I love it. I think that's what makes.
I've been called out,
people like in a positive way, right? In a positive way.
People who knew me 20 years ago, who don't know me now, they would never believe you.
They don't have to. They don't have to. I don't care. But here's where we are. We are in an industry full of people that have the biggest hearts and a ton of emotion. And whether the industry is willing to accept that or not, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. One person at a time, we can change the world. Call me a hippie, call me crazy, call me what you want.
No, that's my saying. Saving my little corner of the world, one patient at a time. Yes.
That's it. And so how we do that, and that's to me what this podcast is about. That's what my coaching is about. That's what I really feel like everyone who's listening today, if you've listened, I think we're almost 30 minutes in, are listening and they're still engaged, you are that person. My listeners are that person. There's so many people. That's why I feel so passionately about this, that it's maybe just a podcast to some. To me, it's a way to really impact the industry. And if we're not having hard conversations and calling each other out and saying, look, it's okay to struggle. Tell me your struggle so I can find you a solution, because you entered into this industry because you felt and saw a struggle and you knew you could find a solution. Fast forward, you're in it, don't have a solution, and are motivated enough by those same emotions to say, I'm going to do it myself. And I've spoken to so many other leaders in this industry in general, but also my podcast. Ryan Thorne's a great one. If you haven't watched his episode, he founded his company because someone went to him and said, one of his supervisors, and he said, hey, here's the plan. I've talked to all these people in the industry. Here's the struggle. Here's what I think we should do. And they said to him, Ryan, if you think you can do it better yourself, do it better yourself. Fast forward, he did it better himself.
Yeah.
And he founded a company on it, and at the wise old age of 20 something, and founded an EMS company that's thriving and that he's doing really well. And he's obviously, I don't have to tell you, he's an incredible emergent leader. So I'm going to tag him in this post too, but it's people like Ryan, it's people like you, it's people like Jacob Johnson, who started in a volunteer service, who has a passion for helping people love their careers and helping people find that thing within them. And I'll tell you, Julianne, I'm a little bit on my soapbox more tonight than usual, but that soapbox is because that's life. People are people. And so at the heart of every person in this industry, I know, is a very vulnerable, emotion-driven human who wants to make a difference in the world. That's why we do what we do.
Well, and I gotta say, the fakery of everything has to be perfect all the time. I mean, we're recording this live. It's not going to be edited. Let's just see what comes out the other side. And by golly, like it, don't like it. It's who we are. And once you learn to be okay with that, once you love yourself, then you are capable of truly loving another human, right? Because if your love that you're giving comes through this bias of how bad you think you are, then you're polluting that love that you're giving to other people.
And receiving.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And receiving. If you don't feel you're worthy of, then you don't believe that someone else can, because the only way to believe that is that you don't, or that you believe that they're lesser and they don't really see you or they don't know you. So that is, I can talk about that for a whole nother episode. But the moral of the story is, I don't have to tell people, and I don't have to tell you, you are a leader in this industry without a doubt. You talked about a mastermind group that you're taking. And this is really kind of a labor of love for you, I'm understanding. What is that mastermind group? Tell me a little bit more about how do people get involved? Who is it for? What's the goal of that project specifically?
So our goal is to provide both technical and, to the degree that we can, emotional support to program directors. I mean, it's sort of like, I don't know, how many people does the president have that he can talk to that have ever been president before? Not very many.
Yeah.
As a program director, I just didn't have a lot of assistance, and I had no safety net. And
Right.
so the idea is to share information. Us mentor types don't intend to talk more than any 3 to 5 minutes at a time. It's not going to be lecture based. It's going to be interactive and question based. And my hope is that relationships will develop to where the newer program directors know that they can reach out either to the group as a whole, or maybe there's one of the mentors that they feel more connected to that they're going to talk to offline. But when they have a problem, here's how I want it to be. When they're having a problem because their boss is down their throat about this, that, or the other, primarily, well, in my experience, it was they didn't understand the conflict between what they were asking me to do and what accreditation required me to do, or my state regulations, whichever. I want the relationships to be tight enough and trusting enough that they can even discuss those things without fear that, something's going to get back to their boss.
Sure.
That's an extreme example. Like I said, we're starting with budgeting. Chris has one way that he does it. David has another way that he does it. And you can find your way somewhere, either a combination of the two, or you like this way or you like that way or whatever, but at least somebody gave you the option, right? Instead of you having to just make it up because they just handed you last year's budget and your budget's due in a week.
Yeah.
So,
and that's so common.
A lot of the trains that we know are coming at them, we're going to try to show them before they hit.
That's awesome. So it's a mentorship group. It's a brainstorming meets mentorship means community group. It's a support group for people who are going through similar things. So there's a couple leadership programs. I've been through one myself. The Fitch program. Ambulance system manager, service manager. I can never remember what it's actually called. ASM. There's a few other leadership programs people go through. Eventually, one day, I'm sure I'll create one of my own and facilitate, because I'm equally as passionate about you. So word to the wise, if you're interested, holla. Which I've never said on a podcast. Here we go. We're in it. It's the end of the year. I just said holla. We're in it. We are so in it. But what I was getting at is community is so important. And the biggest thing that, Anthony Mensch, who's a friend of mine, says all the time, the biggest value of ASM, which is a program he puts together, is not the content, it's the network, it's the community, it's the relationships. And some very close friends of mine in the industry, Brooke Burton to speak specifically, who I never would have known before. She and I went through ASM together. And she's a good friend of mine now, and that we spent a couple weeks together. Yeah, I don't know, 2013, maybe 7-8 years ago. And I see her at conferences, but she's become a good friend of mine. And so a lot of times the thing that, if there's a word of advice, I think for people looking that I could offer, it's that you don't know what you're going to find until sometimes you find it. And so plugging into things that you don't really know what you're doing it for, like I'm going to jump on a networking call with Julianne or with Brett or with, Tim Nowak, who puts that out, and they're just offering their time. And you don't really have an intention of what you're going to get out of it. Do it, because you will be amazed at what you get out of people. There's so many people in this industry who want to give back, who want to offer something, but they don't know how to articulate what they're offering. So you just got to kind of dive in sometimes and go, how do you think you can help me in this thing? How can you support me in this thing? And then I will word vomit all over all the things I think you should do and how you could do it, and offer all this advice that you may or may not want. But you got perspective from different places. So I think that's a very cool manifestation of who you are, Julianne, to say, I'm in a place where not only am I building a company, but I'm staying true to my vision and my mission to build a community of support, so that when people get to that emotional space where they are pushed or pulled to say, I've got to make a choice. Either my students are going to suffer, or I have to find a solution, then it's not that hard of a jump. It's not that big of a decision. And you're creating a community around that, which is very cool. So I love that you're doing that. And thank you for sharing that with me. So you're creating a company, you've been an educator, you have a master mindset group. Anything else that you're doing that people need to know about that you're doing, Julianne, or are those the couple of big ones?
I think that's pretty much covers it, except for I grow things kind of okay.
Okay, well, if I need any
only the things that aren't specific.
Sure.
Do you know the trick to growing? Do you know the trick to growing an orchid is to only give it 4 ice cubes a week?
Yes, I did, because it's my favorite flower. If anybody ever asks,
they're beautiful.
Yeah, my favorite flower. They're tricky, very tricky, which is probably why they're pricey, because everybody kills them. God love the orchid. God love the orchid. Anyway, Julianne, it has been so fun and such a pleasure talking to you. If people want to continue the conversation with you, my friend, how do they get in touch with you best?
They can find me on LinkedIn very easily. My website, sterlingcredentials.com, has a contact page. And, you know, whether they decide to do business with Sterling or not is not relevant to my availability to help and support any fellow human that I possibly can.
You are the epitome of an emergent leader, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am, for having me.